threshold. I know it'll be a school decision, but could we realistically see a full basketball season outside, a full boys volleyball season outside? What are coaches saying to you about that? Is that something that they'd rather do than not do anything at all? I know a lot of people want to see indoor basketball, indoor volleyball, but what's the likelihood, if the guidance isn't changed, to seeing full outdoor seasons of those usual indoor sports?
Well, we want to see full indoor participation return as well. The issue is going to be so far, and as you all know, we've been working constantly with the California Department of Public Health and the governor's office trying to get revised guidelines ever since December. And actually it dates back to October when we submitted our original thought process and our planning with our Sports Medicine Advisory Committee. So where we got guidelines revised and where the guidelines you saw today, they deal with the outdoor sports and they deal with indoor sports that can play outdoors until the time would come that we would get the green light, so to speak, for indoor sports to go back indoors. So that's the process that's going to play out here going forward. If schools want to start playing outdoors, they can. And then we're still going to continue those discussions and still work on getting a revision for indoor sports so that they potentially can return. And then, of course, that will all depend on that process playing out to know what our situation would be with championships and so forth at the section level. And as you all, to remind you, we had talked earlier about looking at early April, maybe to mid-April, where we would make a determination on holding our Southern Section championships in spring sports. And so we do have some time for this to go forward and see where we are as we approach early to mid-April.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Tim Burt, OC Sports.
Hi, Rob and Tom. Thank you. Can you tell me exactly what sports will be able to start on February 26th, what the status of soccer would be, and then also the yellow tiered sports, baseball and softball? Thank you.
Well, yeah, sure, Tim. Thanks. I'm going to just refer to the document that came out already. I mean, we tried to lay out as many of our sports, all of our sports that would begin under these guidelines. So for boys and girls water polo, their first competition date would be February 26th. And they do have the testing requirement that the California Department of Public Health is mandating, but that would be their date. Football, we gave 3 different scenarios based on a county reaching 14 cases per 100,000 or below, either this Tuesday, the week after that, or the week after that. And also provided everybody with the most recent case rates, adjusted case rates per 100,000 for our 7 counties. So I can go through the list pretty quickly. Boys, girls water polo was February 26th. Football, we presented 3 different scenarios, a February 23, a March 2, and a March 9. Girls tennis starts Monday, the 22nd of February as planned, dual matches only. Boys and girls soccer, February 27. Boys tennis, March 1, again, dual matches only. Boys, girls lacrosse, March 12. Boys, girls swimming and diving, March 13, dual meets only. Baseball, March 19, softball, March 19. Boys, girls golf, March 20, dual matches only. Boys, girls track and field, March 20, dual meets only. Those are all the spring sports that are scheduled. Those are all the original starting dates for them. And hopefully all of our counties will be in that 14 or below per 100,000 by the dates that those sports are scheduled to begin. And then our indoor sports that if they choose to play outdoors, girls volleyball would be February 26th. Their season ends on March 20th. Traditional competitive cheer could start immediately in a virtual format or a dual match format. Boys and girls wrestling is March 5, dual matches only. Badminton is March 6, dual matches only. Boys girls basketball, March 12. Boys volleyball, March 13. Competitive sport cheer, also known as stunt, is March 27. So that's all the sports lined up from now going forward. And again, outdoor sports, if they are 14 or below, can begin in those dates. Indoor sports can begin outdoors if they're below 14, while we continue to work on a plan for indoor sports to resume inside.
You have a follow-up, Tim? Hearing none. AJ, Spectrum Sports.
Hi, Rob. As it relates to the contact sports, while LA County especially is above the 14 per 100,000 threshold, what can those teams do immediately in regards to practice in terms of frequency? And as it relates to football, can pads be worn? What can they do to be prepared for when we go under the threshold?
Well, AJ, that's why we put out 3 scenarios as they relate to football, because the rules and guidelines for practice in football are going to be based on when a county reaches that particular threshold. So, if you take the LA County example that you want to give, last week it was 20.0. They need to get to 14 or below by next Tuesday. And if so, then they could begin. First 3 days would be non-contact, our conditioning days mandated by our bylaw. And then on day 4, they could put the pads on, which in that scenario would be February 26th. And then obviously they continue on through until they meet the minimum number of days of practice before they have an interscholastic scrimmage, and the minimum number of days of practice before they have an actual game. So that's how it's going to play out. And we presented 3 scenarios, as I mentioned, so that schools would be able to see that when their county reaches the threshold, they would be able to implement one of those scenarios based on the date their county reached it.
Okay, thanks, AJ. Steve Fryer.
Hey guys, so we got this document from the state government that has Orange County at the numbers for positivity rates, 16 currently, and then your group sent out something 20.7, which is adjusted case rates. And I know looking at some of the information, the numbers are different in the various columns. Why the discrepancy, and which is the one that we should be looking at when we're talking to coaches and athletic directors, and we're telling them, this is how far you got to go to get to 14. Is it 16 or is it 20.7, sort of that launch point? Thank you.
Sure. The thing about it, Steve, it's adjusted case rate per 100,000. So what you saw in the document that we released today was the adjusted case rate for our 7 counties as of last Tuesday, February 16. And that's the same date that's used on the document that the CIF State Office released today. So we're eagerly looking forward to next Tuesday, the 23rd of February, where it was 20.7 last week. You're saying that it's already trending downward, and they do it each day. So there is a day, you can get a rate each day, but we're going to be using the weekly Tuesday release that comes from the government, the state government, and use that adjusted case rate per 100,000. So at 20.7, that's on February 16. You're saying on February 19, it's less than that already. And obviously the key number will be February 23 on Tuesday of next week, where if they fall at 14 or below, then obviously they will be able to implement these measures that we released this afternoon.
Okay, so currently, this came out, actually, we got this morning. So right now, 16 is the starting point, I guess, and the de facto starting point, not 20.7. That's already kind of good news, isn't it?
Well, it is, but remember, it's a daily thing, so it's a daily number. But I'll just, again, for anyone who's interested, I mean, you're in Orange County, the case rate from February 9th through February 16th. So we gave you the number of 20.7. On February 9th, that number was 29.7. So it went down 9 between the 9th and 16th of February. And obviously now between the 16th and 23rd, we hope at least from 20.7, it gets to 14 or below. It goes 6.7 or more, and then they implement. If Riverside County was our highest number, Riverside is at 28.8 last Tuesday. So they would need to do a little bit more work, obviously, to get to 14. So if it doesn't happen for Riverside County by next Tuesday, hopefully it would happen the Tuesday after. And that's, kind of how this will play out. So the ranges, that was our highest one at 28.8. And again, we just hope that, but they went down 16 cases between February 9th and February 16th.
Nice.
So,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's some of this, some of the numbers may not fall as dramatically because now the numbers are lower. I mean, when the numbers were 80, they could dramatically decrease by 20. They won't decrease necessarily by 20 in a week, but even last week's rates ranged everywhere from 8 to 9, all the way up to 16 in Riverside, 15 in Ventura. So there was a huge reduction even from last week, from the 9th to the 16th. And again, we just really hope, and we're optimistic that they'll get below the number they need to when it comes out this coming Tuesday on the 23rd.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Manny Alvarez.
Thank you, Tom. When competitive sports does come back, what are the options for fans? I know people are eager to go in the stands. Obviously, that might not be an option. Well, however, can it be an option? Maybe limited seating, or I mean, what other avenues are there? And then, do the school districts or the schools can they kind of police that themselves, or they have to go through some guidelines through either you guys or the state?
California Department of Public Health guidelines recommend and basically allow what we call immediate family. And now that will be up to schools to make the determination of what immediate family means. And as we go forward, depending on their facilities, depending on what the circumstances are, they will make those ultimate decisions on who's going to be allowed in to watch. They've talked about in the guidelines the appropriate social distancing, of course, mask wearing, the other kinds of basic protocols that we've been looking at. And don't forget, we have 36 pages of protocols that were released back in December by the CIF and the CIF Sports Medicine Advisory Committee that give help to schools on how to conduct these contests on their campuses. So I definitely want to remind people about those guidelines. They still remain in place. You can get them on the CIF state website. We also released them back in December when we put them on an update that was released by our office. So those combination of factors will come to play here in terms of allowing fans into the stands or parents and immediate family as per these guidelines.
Now, are there any other options? I know some stadiums already have that streaming camera ready to go, but is there any options you guys can provide? Perhaps, televised games or streaming or any other information?
Well, we're, the moment that we had information that we were back with potential for sports to return, we have partners with the Fox Sinclair Broadcast Group, the National Federation of High School Network. We expect we'll be hearing from many more streaming entities probably that would like to put some games out there and get them for everyone to watch, since they may not be allowed into the actual playing facilities to watch them. All of our schools certainly have the option to start streaming games and do those kinds of things. What is required
Are you prepared if, one county meets it, but two counties don't, that we would just have a season maybe with one county and you'd have to play it by ear like that?
Well, we have to see how it plays out. But I'd like to be very hopeful and optimistic about these numbers. As I mentioned to you, our lowest number was 15.6 in San Luis Obispo County, and our highest was Riverside at 28.8. So we're not that far away. And with the rapid decrease in these numbers, these adjusted case rates, I really would anticipate that all of our counties are going to get there, if not by this coming week, certainly hopefully at least by the next week after that, the first week of March. And if that's the case, then again, there's going to be opportunities for our programs to be out there and get student athletes back to what they love to do and what we love to watch them do. So we'll have to monitor it. If what you say potentially happens where we only have one or two counties that are able to resume, we'll have to take a look at that at the time. But I also want to remind everybody, regardless of California Department of Public Health guidelines, regardless of all the information that you've been given today, these are still going to be individual school district and private school decisions on whether they're going to bring their athletic programs back on campus. And, we've been saying that ever since the beginning of this back in mid-March. And that's the same case 11 plus months later. So even if a county or the California Department of Public Health is allowing for this to happen, our individual schools and school districts and private schools are still going to make the decisions that are in the best interest of their schools and their communities as to what they're going to have coming back. And we're going to respect those decisions. We're going to support those decisions, and we're going to do everything we can do to help our schools in the effort to get the sports programs back on campus.
And just one follow question. So, once this starts, and let's say counties start meeting the threshold, maybe all of the counties meet the threshold. Are we then going to be watching this on a week by week basis? If you fall outside the threshold, all of a sudden that whole county is stopped, and they have to wait to the next week to see where it's going. Is it going to be a situation like that where it's kind of week to week to maintain that threshold level?
In this initial circumstance that we've got the information, our understanding is that they can continue on. If they get started, they can continue. So you're right. If they get to 12 cases and get started, and then 2 weeks later they went back to 16, they would not have to interrupt and stop what they were doing. Our schools could continue to go forward with their programs as long as they reach that threshold.
Oh, that's great to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
James Escarcega.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Tom. A quick question, Rob. I was brought to my attention that counties that are not linked to one another will not be able to play, such as if Ventura County School cannot play a team from Riverside County or San Bernardino County. Will that make it kind of complicated if we're still in this situation come the playoffs?
It would make it complicated. The travel limitations as they exist allow adjoining counties to compete, schools from one county and the county next to them, as long as they're both in the same situation. So if Ventura County gets to below 14 and Santa Barbara County is still above, then they aren't going to be allowed to play each other across those county lines. But if they both get to below 14, then they can. But right now it's adjoining counties. So that Ventura County can go north or they can go south one county, but they wouldn't be able to go down to Orange County, let's say, or another county across more than one. And that's how it's initially going to be done. And obviously, it's a starting point. And we've said from the beginning, we just needed a chance. We needed an opportunity to bring sports back and get going. And so once we do, and hopefully we can prove that it can be done in a healthy and safe way, we can start to approach multiple county travel. We can start talking about multiple school events that can take place. We can start talking about some other steps that we would love to see happen going forward. But like a lot of things, it doesn't all happen at once. So that's how we're approaching it. And we'll continue to press the case with the California Department of Public Health, the governor's office, about how we can continue this path towards more of the normal type of activities that we have. And that will be ongoing.
I have a follow-up question, Tom. So if we have a sectional final, Rob, has the section begun maybe, I would say, a process of establishing protocols in place to have, for in regards to testing or things of that sort, so that if a player does get positive, maybe 2 days before that, there are protocols in place?
Well, again, the testing issues are going to be school issues. They're going to be handled. Those are their students. They're not our students. And so that will all, or coaches too, but that will all be part of their processes and so forth with the testing issues that they may have. I mean, right now, the only sports that have to be tested are football and boys and girls water polo. By the time we talk about some of these spring sports, there is not currently a testing requirement by anything in the California Department of Public Health. However, if a positive test does come forward, again, we're going to be working with local county health departments in these locations if we are able to have our championships. And I'm sure they will have protocols that they would want us to implement if we're going to have track and field championships at El Camino College in Los Angeles County. We're going to have swimming and diving championships in Riverside County at Riverside Community College. We're going to have to work with those health departments and make sure that protocols they want us to implement so we can hold those events will be followed, which would include if there's a positive test result or whatever might be happening prior to one of our events.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Taylor Begley.
Hi, Rob. Hope you are doing well. My question is based on the high contact sports, particularly football. Have you had any concerns about not having enough time to prepare athletes physically for a season? Has that come up at all amongst coaches or anyone you've talked
Well, sure they have, Taylor. I mean, we have such a wide variety of what has happened in terms of our section, as large as we are and as much of the geographic area that we cover. You know, we have schools that have conditioned and continued to condition and have their student athletes out on the fields and doing what they can do, following guidelines that they've had to follow. And we have some schools that haven't really been able to do much of anything. So there's going to be a wide variance. And again, it kind of comes back to earlier when I mentioned that these individual schools, school districts, and private schools will decide what's in the best interest of their student athletes and their communities to see what they can do to resume their sports programs. So, you know, we've outlined some football scenarios. They are the guidelines and the bylaws that we have in place. And whether that's enough time or not, again, will depend on our schools and how they navigate through that. And we'll look forward to seeing how that plays out here over the next few weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Eric Sondheimer.
Okay, deal with me because I've been having some Zoom issues. The question would be, when would you adjust the end of football date till April 30th? Is that dependent on how many teams can get going by March 1st?
At this time, we have no plans to extend the football season beyond April 17.
So why is that? Because I've talked to coaches and they're hoping for that. So that's a no deal.
Well, at this time, that's the decision. And what everyone needs to remember is we have a bigger picture here than just one sport. And we have a very ambitious list of spring sports that's already been in place, and the schedule for those sports has been in place for a long time. And so if we were going to look at continually moving any of our fall sports further back, it's going to impact that spring sports situation. It's going to impact our student athletes, our coaches, our facilities. So it wouldn't just be a football issue. Everyone else would have a very valid question to say, well, then we need to look at boys and girls water polo. We need to look at girls volleyball. We need to look at those sports and potentially move them back a couple more weeks. And by doing so, you now have boys and girls water polo and swimming for boys and girls now even further overlapping. You have girls volleyball now trying to fit into a situation where you have girls volleyball, boys and girls basketball, and wrestling trying to fit into the same time frame and the same facilities. So I think if you look at it a little bit of a bigger picture than just one sport, you will realize that even making that decision would be something that would have a huge impact on so many issues with our schools. And so we're staying the course on the original schedules that actually were released in July of 2020, and we believe that's the best path for us to go forward from our schools.
Even though other sections are moving to April 30th?
Well, the only two that I'm aware of are the northern section and the Los Angeles City section. Those are the only two sections that I'm aware of that have gone ahead and said they're going to go to April 30. So those are their decisions made in their interest. It's part of being a federation. And again, I've had a lot of feedback from non-football coaches. And when I say that, I mean athletic directors, I mean administrators who have said, we hope that you stay with April 17th for football because we really believe moving it even further back would impact us. And then, of course, again, we wouldn't just do that. It wouldn't be fair to girls volleyball, to boys and girls water polo, even to cross country, who is going on for the rest of this up till March 27. It just wouldn't be fair to all the programs, not only in the fall, but you have to make sure you were fair to all of them. But then you're really taking it and again, further imposing on spring sports programs that would start to lose student athletes and facilities and other things that they have been waiting for since last year, when the spring sports unfortunately lost about 2/3 of their season. So like I said, you have to look at it a little bit of a bigger picture. And in these scenarios that I've illustrated, I mean, if we can get schools back with football by February 23rd, they're going to have a chance to have an interscholastic scrimmage and 6 football games. And I think at this point, that would be fairly acceptable. Unfortunately, we can't have championships. But if our football programs can have a scrimmage and 6 games, if they can start February 23rd, and if it's the next week on March 2nd, they can have 5 games in a scrimmage. You know, we think that's adequate. And that would be meeting the needs of our schools as best as we can, because we weren't going to have a 10-game football season. And then, so that's the answer at this point. We're going to stay with April 17 as originally planned.
Andrew.
I had to find out how to unmute myself. Hi, Rob. Andrew Turner with the Daily Pilot. Certainly appreciate the explanation about the logistics as it comes with football and extending the date. I had also heard coaches talk about a potential extension to April 30th, May 1st. But another concern with logistics was just with regard to the COVID-19 mandatory testing and what that would look like. Clearly, this is some of the biggest ray of hope that kids have had for their sports in quite some time. And I think coaches are concerned about putting it out there that, yes, we're going to have a season, and that they don't want their kids to be let down again. So they don't want to be led on. How do we make sure that COVID-19 testing is available to all schools and not to a few?
Well, the COVID-19 testing requirement that the California Department of Public Health put in there, very important in the conversations that we had, is that it was fair and accessible to everyone. I mean, if you're going to mandate a testing program, then you have to make sure that there's access to everyone. You can't just be confined to those that could afford it, or those that might have better access to being able to do it. So what we heard today was that the state government is going to allow for the testing to happen and foot the bill and pay the bill for it, for everyone. And so we'll take them at their word and say that that would mean it is accessible to everyone that wishes to do it. And they'll be the ones to provide it in terms of the cost and the things involved, although it will be our schools, school districts, private schools that will have to go to the logistics, as using your word, of how to actually implement their testing procedures. It's supposed to be a weekly testing program. We don't want to hold up the start of this. So that's why I get these football scenarios and these other dates that we've talked about. Some of these answers are going to come next week, and we'll get those answers. But we don't want to say, well, we have to wait till next week or wait longer to get answers on that specific issue. We can roll out and implement these calendars immediately and based on what we outlined for the document we released in terms of our Southern Section update, and get to clarify some more on the testing as we get those answers starting in the next few days and into next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fred Robledo.
Yeah, when it comes to transfers, you'd mentioned earlier, Rob, we could be in a situation where, it is up to each school district whether they're going to start or not. What happens in scenarios where, you've got half the schools in LA County that, let's say, they don't want to play for whatever reasons and half do? What do we do with transfers? What if a kid says, hey, my school's not playing, I want to go across town to the school that's playing? Will they be immediately eligible? Will there have to be a sit-out period? Are there going to be any new considerations given for situations like that, where kids that want to play and are in a situation where they can't, just because their district want to just go somewhere else so they can play?
Well, our current bylaw 207 provides a hardship waiver process for what we call a discontinued program. So when a student is at a school that discontinues a program and we have written verification that it has been a discontinued program, then the student can apply for a hardship waiver for immediate eligibility at any school that they would choose to go to. So we certainly hope that's not the case. We would really hope that those that are able to resume and as many schools as can resume will do so. We've seen a little bit about what that might mean in terms of a section, where if the Los Angeles City section is not able to resume and schools that are right next door in terms of Southern Section schools are playing sports, would there be students from the Los Angeles Unified School District wanting to transfer immediately under that discontinued program situation? So, that won't be a good situation for schools in either direction. I mean, an influx of brand new students in this uncertain time already is going to be a difficult thing. And of course, an exodus from schools that would see students leave wouldn't be a good thing either. But, the bylaws do provide for that provision. And we have to be honest in the application of our bylaws on how it would be put to application in a case that you describe.
Yeah, one follow-up question. Is that a concerning issue? Because when you think of distance learning, kids can transfer without really having to leave their house and go anywhere, because most schools are still going to be in a distance learning format.
Well, our transfers have been 80% reduced from a typical year this year. So, we've certainly seen that in the climate without any sports, basically, except for cross country that just started recently, without having high school athletics back, students have not been transferring. They've been staying put. But
But now the game is going to change, though.
well, you're correct, and that's your point, and I get it completely. But I don't know that we can only apply the bylaws that our member schools have put in place, and we would do so. But I think we can all agree it's a very disruptive and an already ever changing and difficult environment to then all of a sudden start seeing thousands of students trying to get to different schools so that they can, get into a high school athletic program experience and get a chance to play. I'm not going to begrudge them for that. I'm not going to say that if their own school isn't playing, they have to stay there and deal with that, because if that's their desire to try to go somewhere where they could have that experience, I mean, it only continues to reinforce what I always talk about, why high school athletics and education-based athletics is so important, why it is so valuable, why it's something that people really, really look to as an important thing and valuable thing to do. So, like I said, we'll have to see how that plays out. But it's been interesting to watch the transfers each month this entire year. And now, depending on what schools, school districts, private schools decide, what will be the result of schools that may not decide to come back when there are other schools that do.
And a really quick last question. Under a hardship situation, you would be eligible right away. Is that correct?
With proof that the discontinued program at your former school is discontinued, we would have to evaluate that and look at the situation. We certainly have to look at issues like our bylaw 510. There can't be connections to coaches and or any kind of pre-enrollment issues where a student is transferring somewhere where they've been talking to that school or talking to that coaching staff or had a connection on an outside team or some way that they are connected to the school they decide to transfer to. That bylaw still remains. So it isn't necessarily a completely open process. We would evaluate those cases on a case-by-case basis. But in terms of the general bylaw that talks about discontinued program, that is contained in bylaw 207. It is there for circumstances that a program is discontinued at a school and a student transfers. And if they are granted the hardship waiver, it's for immediate eligibility.
Thank you.
Connor Morissette.
Rob, for football, it's 2 weeks of practice once you're given the green light. And then do you need to scrimmage? You can't just jump into the regular season, even in a shortened season, or do you not have to scrimmage?
Oh, no, the scrimmage is not a requirement. I wanted to make sure our schools were aware that they were permitted to have their interscholastic scrimmage, provided they've had at least 10 days of practice before they do it. So again, it's just part of getting this started for football programs. I would think a lot of our coaches would like to have a scrimmage. It'd be a great way, especially with the earlier question about how much has been done up until this point to resume a football program. Maybe that scrimmage is going to be a really valuable experience before they actually play a game. So, we're at least, I don't know if pleased is the right word, but just at least the ability to do that, we think is only an advantage to our schools. They choose not to have a scrimmage and just wait until they play their first contest after having 14 days of practice as required, then that's certainly their decision. But if they decide not to scrimmage, that's not anything that is against a bylaw or a rule. That's just their choice. However, I would imagine that a lot of our schools would want to have that scrimmage. It's a good experience to get students reacclimated and kind of ready to go before you're actually playing in a real game.
You mentioned 10 days of practice. Could you scrimmage on day 11 and then play game 1 on day 15, or is that against the bylaw?
That is exactly how it's supposed to go. You've got to have at least 10 days. You can scrimmage on day 11. You got to have at least 14 days of practice. You can play on day 15.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shad Powers.
Hey, Rob, Shad from Desert Sun. The scenarios you put out for football sort of hinted at this, but I guess I'm wondering about practice. Some of the coaches I've talked to have been a little confused. Let's say water polo, for example. Can a water polo team start practicing on February 26th, even if the county is not under 14? Or does the 14 to 100,000 apply to practices as well as competition?
14 days, the 14 threshold does apply to that. So until you reach that 14 or less threshold, then you wouldn't be having full contact practices or any kind of activities like that. You could still be doing the conditioning type of workouts and other things that have been taking place already. But before you actually get into starting to play that kind of contest or get ready to play those games, then you would you'd have to be at 14 or below.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm just going to tell you that we got one more question in the queue. So Manny's gonna come up, and then after that, forever hold your peace. Manny Alvarez.
Thank you, Tom. I already forgot my question. So Rob, I know that, I mean, it's out of your hands, but some fans have been irate and upset and potentially maybe just kind of want to distance themselves from ever attending CIF sports ever again. Is there something you guys haven't planned to maybe kind of win them back, even though you guys had no fault in this? And I mean, is there like maybe potentially like a promotional thing? I mean, is there something you can do to win those fans who've been upset over the whole pandemic?
The people that are informed and know what's going on, I think, are the people that understand this pretty well. In seeing and hearing from those who have wanted to place a majority of the blame on the CIF or the Southern section, those folks are misinformed and they really do not understand how this all plays out. And so that has been disappointing. There's plenty of times and we are accountable and we will always take ownership of the decisions that we make. When the decisions are not ours to make, it's kind of hard to see that people believe that somehow we are responsible for those decisions. So I will say that our school people, our principals, athletic directors, our coaches have been tremendous. They've been absolutely tremendous in their support of the efforts that we've made to try to get sports to come back. If anyone thinks for 1 second that the CIF or the CIF Southern section does not want student athletes to return to play in a healthy and safe way, they are so completely wrong. And that's our message. And I hope those who may say that somehow they are going to separate themselves from CIF and education-based athletics and no longer consider to be part of it or support it, then I say they're missing out on something tremendous. They're missing out on something very special. It is unique to what we do. It is something that, with it gone as it's been gone, people, I hope, really do appreciate it now and appreciate it more when it will come back. So as I mentioned, I believe in what we do and who we do it for, and I'll always believe that. And we'll stand on that because that's who we are. And that's what we do for young people. And if you can't get behind that and you can't support that, then the problem really isn't with us. The problem is with you, who doesn't see what I think the majority of people who are informed can see very clearly of just how great education-based athletics is.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Tim Burt.
Hey, Rob and Tom, thank you. Just to clarify, I haven't seen your latest memo, but baseball and softball are due to return in mid-March. Is that correct?
March 19 was the original date for them. That is still the date as of today. And again, with this guidance and guidelines that came today, we believe that's a pretty realistic opportunity to get started on time. They're close already. And as we get closer to March 19, we certainly hope these reductions in the numbers continue. And that'll be a great thing for the baseball and softball programs and the other programs that basically we stayed the course in terms of our original schedules. And by doing so, we'll be able to provide exactly what we said we would hope to provide: a full regular season, hopefully championship opportunities, and all the things that we had talked about way back in July when we announced the schedule.
It looks like no tournaments, however. Is that correct?
At the moment, that's correct. But again, if these numbers keep going down and we keep the dialogue going, we certainly hope to see that multiple school events, multiple county travel, some of the things that we are definitely used to and know as part of our experience will get the opportunity to return. But like a lot of things, and maybe I said it earlier, we have to start somewhere. We had to get our opportunities, and now we've got some opportunities. We need to build on that, show that it can be done right. We always believe that we can do it right. And then, later on, you can start to have that conversation with real data, real evidence that it is working, and then start approaching new things that we still need to do. We're not done. We're getting some definite progress, but we're certainly not done. And we're going to continue to fight and advocate for what we need to do to get everything back. And that'll be part of it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
James Escarcega.
Quick question, Rob. Can you give us an update on the application process for the second loan from the PPP from the government, please? Thank you.
The second PPP loan has been submitted, has been approved. We have our first PPP loan that we have submitted for forgiveness, which you have to do. We submitted that earlier this month to have the first one forgiven. And we just recently received the information that the second one has been funded and will be looking to include what we need to include from that help that we've gotten.
No follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Roberto.
Rob, I wanted to ask you about the advocate groups and how much that played a role in today's decision. You know, the Let Them Play had become a really big thing on Facebook. It had been all over social media. We had the new NFHA guidelines that came out that kind of suggested that you know, playing sports had limited transmission on field, and CIF was also there applying a lot of pressure. How much did all of that help, you think, the state come to the decision they did today?
I think it did help, and we were certainly supportive of groups that wanted the same thing that we did. So if you're referring to Let Them Play or the California Football Coaches Association and other groups that were out there, we were all saying the same thing. We wanted student athletes to return. So, you know, I think maybe it's sometimes people might have portrayed that somehow we were at odds with those groups, and that's absolutely the opposite. There were many conversations that took place that the CIF was involved in, and specifically CIF Executive Director Ron Nichetti, who I want to credit and thank on behalf of not only myself, but our entire section, and I know the other sections. Ron Nichetti was involved in as many meetings as you can imagine with both the governor's office and the California Department of Public Health, sometimes by himself, sometimes with groups like Let Them Play and or the California Football Coaches Association. So we had a lot of involvement in this. And you know, I just hope that people realize that. I think we all had the same message, that we wanted the same thing. So whatever it took, and whether anyone wants to assign any credit or whatever, I don't think that's the issue. The issue was to get and come through and deliver for student athletes, and we started to do that. And like I said, we're still not done. And so I'll be happy and supportive of anybody who wants the same things that we do. And I think some of the groups that were out there certainly were on the same page that we were. And regardless, you know, I talk about this a lot. We are sometimes on a circuitous route. We want to get to where we want to get. And sometimes we don't get there as fast as we want to, or as much as we wish we could. But the point is getting there. And then when we get there, you know, how we got there doesn't become as important as making sure that we can continue to progress. And I really think that's important for people to know. We worked extremely hard on this. And maybe it relates back to the earlier thought about those that wanted to take to social media or other places and somehow try to disparage what CIF was doing or what we were trying to do in terms of the efforts we were making. This has been a constant daily effort every single day since mid-March. And again, the CIF executive director, the section commissioners, all of us have been nonstop since that time doing anything we could do to try to get us to return to play. So I just hope people understand that and realize that it was a multi-pronged approach. And when people asked us, you know, schools would ask us, what can our parents do? We would say, get involved in this. You know, they're voters. Send the letters, send the emails, do what they need to do to get the message out. That's how you can help mobilize your parents if they're looking for things to do to try to help. And so, like I said, I'd like to believe that there was a commonality in terms of all of our goals. Maybe we would go about it a little bit differently, but I'd like to think that it all worked together in some way to make some progress. And we're going to continue to do that and keep progressing from today.
Very good. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Tom, for having this.
Thank you, Fred.
Okay, last chance for romance. If there's anybody who has a question, going once, going twice. Sold. Okay, Robert, would you like to wrap it up?
Just again, thanks to everyone. Appreciate it. We're here, you know, through Tom. Please reach out if there's anything else that we can do to continue to help clarify things or get messages out for the work that you all do. We're happy to do it. And again, just thanks for joining us today. Bear with us. We're excited to see steps taken, but don't think for a minute we're not still trying to keep it moving forward and get even more done in the time ahead. So we'll start here. We'll get things going, and we'll keep working on getting it all back together as soon as we can do that. So thanks again. Take care. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you all down the road, I'm sure.
Thank you, everybody.